Over the weekend, the federal Liberal Party unveiled its much-anticipated election platform, marking a pivotal moment in the final stretch of the 2025 campaign.
Part of standing up is to have the plan to manage through the chaos to a better future for all Canadians. Now, I've managed crises virtually my entire career. I helped Canada navigate through the 2008 global financial crisis. I guided the UK through the turmoil of Brexit. I know what it takes to not merely survive a crisis, but to emerge stronger than before. I know what it means to be entrusted with making the decisions that will affect the lives and livelihoods of millions of people. I know how to manage the chaos created by President Trump. I know how we in Canada can win this trade war, how we can build the strongest economy in the G7. And that starts with knowing that when you are in a crisis, you have to prepare for the worst. You can't hope for the best. Government needs to step up. Government must lead and catalyze private investment. I know from traveling across our great country that Canadians are ready to step up. Canadians don't just want to resist the U.S. Canadians are determined to win. And so our task as a nation, thank you, I'm here. Our task as a nation over the coming weeks, months, and years is to think big and to act bigger. Because we're not helpless in this. We're not just passive observers of a rapidly changing world, and we certainly aren't the United States. We're Canada. We are free, sovereign, ambitious.
With national security, economic resilience, and international diplomacy front and center, the Liberals are making a calculated push to solidify their lead and differentiate themselves from a rising Conservative opposition. To unpack the strategy behind the platform and what signals for the days ahead, we're now joined by Liberal strategist Andrew Perez. Andrew, as always, it's great to have you on.
Great to be here with you.
Now, what are the big ticket items Canadians should know about the Carney platform?
This is a visionary plan, Theresa, that is really a combination of catalyzing major private sector investment in the economy with continuing a healthy pace of social spending. $130 billion over the coming 4 years. These monies are going to flow to building better healthcare infrastructure. $18 billion earmarked for the Canadian military so that Canada can exceed its 2% of GDP commitment to NATO. And also a great deal of money is allocated for housing. A Carney government would double the pace of residential construction across this country to create more affordable and deeply affordable housing for the under 40 demographic. And so it's a platform tailored for the moment we're in. It's a platform that's Trump-proof and that is ready to confront what is a real crisis to both our sovereignty and our economic prosperity. And it stands in contrast to largely a slash and burn platform that is Doge-like, US-style Doge-like cuts to the public service that the Conservatives released earlier today.
And on Carney's platform and budget, we're looking at consecutive deficits year over year with spending beyond what Trudeau spent. Now, many thought initially that Carney would be different than Trudeau in that respect, but now argue that Carney is more of the same. What do you make of that criticism?
Well, to be clear, the Conservatives aren't promising a balanced budget, and their accounting is very questionable. They haven't accounted for, they want to cut taxes by $75 billion. And economists have already taken to X, formerly Twitter, today to question the accounting in the Conservative platform. As for the Liberal platform, Carney's going to do something that's never been done before. He's going to divide the fiscal framework into an operating budget and a capital budget. The operating budget will go to services, and the capital budget will be investments in machinery, equipment, infrastructure, things that will spur the Canadian economy. And Carney is promising to balance the operating budget rather within 4 years. But I want to add one key point, Theresa. The Liberal platform does not put together rosy economic predictions like the Conservative platform. It assumes a worst case scenario in terms of the economic growth that we're going to have for the next 4 years, whereas the Conservative platform seems to assume a best case scenario. And so I think it's actually a much more prudent plan. In spite of the spending that I think is necessary, it's a prudent plan because it assumes worst case scenario in terms of economic growth. And in fact, if the Liberal plan is fully executed over the coming 4 years, I do think that we will exceed expectations in terms of economic growth and actually balance the budget at an earlier date.
Well, I do want to stay on the spending because how can Carney claim that the Trudeau government spent too much while promising to spend more?
Well, I think it's not just about spending. We are talking about spending strategically, catalyzing private sector investment, expediting east-west pipelines, large-scale infrastructure projects, natural resource projects that are going to create thousands and thousands of Canadian jobs. Carney has also promised to do something that we haven't seen since the Paul Martin government nearly 20 years ago, a line-by-line expenditure review. So going through the budget, the federal budget line item by line item to identify efficiencies. And I think, Theresa, this process will yield efficiencies and less spending when it comes to the size of the public service, which we know grew by 40% under the Trudeau era. So yes, they're spending, but I think in a time of crisis, we need to spend strategically on infrastructure. And I just say finally, there are a lot of services that the Trudeau government and national programs brought on that Canadians are reliant upon. Dental care, which 8 million Canadians rely on, especially low-income seniors, national pharmacare, the Canada Child Benefit. The Conservative Party would cut all three of those programs, leaving vulnerable Canadians at risk.
And on the division of an operating budget and a capital budget, critics have argued that regardless of how that is split on the balance sheet, it's taxpayers who are going to end up taking the hit and will have to pay that. Debt is debt, is it not?
I mean, debt is a reality in every government, and governments incur debt. And what's important is that there's a plan with realistic forecasts to pay down that debt and to eventually balance the budget. And that's precisely what Carney has laid out. And again, it's all about economic growth. We cannot cut services that Canadians rely upon at this very precarious time.
Now, Carney has laid out balancing the budget, but he's not planning to balance the budget until year 5, which would mean almost 15 years of deficits. Would it not be prudent to get there quicker?
The Conservatives aren't planning to balance the budget within 4 years. The Conservatives are actually planning to spend just as much money or more money. They haven't accounted for how they're going to pay for a $75 billion worth of tax cuts. The Conservatives are promising to spend just as much money to revamp the Canadian military. And they're really relying on slashing and burning the size of the public service, CBC Radio-Canada, and foreign aid. I don't think that's a very prudent approach at this time in our history to slash CBC Radio-Canada, which is part of the Canadian identity. We need to improve CBC Radio-Canada, but we don't need to slash it. And by the way, Carney, while he's not going to cut the size of the public service, he has committed to capping the size of the public service.
And on revenue from counter tariffs, Canadians, generally speaking, pay the cost of the tariffs when they buy U.S. goods. Is that not just a tax increase on Canadians?
No, I think, look, we have to respond with a dollar for dollar retaliatory approach. The Conservatives have said as much. And in fact, in the Conservatives' fiscal plan, which I have poked holes in, they are actually relying on those monies from the counter tariffs to fund a lot of their spending. And so I think there's a cross-partisan consensus that a retaliatory approach is necessary and that those monies will be used within the fiscal framework in the coming 4 years. I'd just like to add, finally, the Liberal Party did release its platform last weekend, 67 pages, very concrete. The Conservatives released a mere 30-page platform earlier today with half of the platform is photos of the leader and his wife. It's very much a marketing document. There's not a lot of specifics. It's not a plan that is Trump-proof, that meets the moment we're in. And that's really the approach of the Liberal Party, to put forward a platform and a plan that will confront the threat that Donald Trump poses and grow our economy to make our economy the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you so much, Theresa.